Well, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Tyler's Real Fishing. In today's episode, we're going to talk about fishing line. Everything you have to know about the main three types of fishing line that are out there, and of course, how you can use them to catch the most bass possible. But before we jump into that content, I have to mention that today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions of people come together to take their next step in their creative journey. More about that coming up later. So, fishing line. The one thing that is necessary to catch fish, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's bass, trout, muskie, anything from freshwater to saltwater, lakes, rivers, and streams, you need fishing line to get those fish in the boat. And over time, the advances in technology in the fishing line industry have made it so that some of these lines are just incredible. They are abrasion resistant, they have almost no stretch, they are almost virtually invisible in the water. But of course, where should you use each one? In this video, I'm going to talk about the three different main types of fishing line that are out there, what they are used for, what I use them for, and then show you guys a stretch test to show you how each different line is affected by stretching and pulling, which of course will affect the way that you work your lures, have casting distance, and set the hook to get that fish back in the boat. So the first line that we're going to talk about is the tried and true, has been here since the beginning of fishing, and that is monofilament line. This here is basically the industry standard. It's Berkley trilene. I would talk about Seaguar, but at least in my knowledge, I don't think we at Seaguar even make monofilament line anymore. We're so focused on Fluorocarbon and Braid, so I feel like I can talk about Berkley trilene, but it's been around the longest. It's one of the best monofilament lines out there. But as I'll talk about here in a second, I really don't use monofilament line. There's a myriad of reasons for that, but here's kind of the advantages. Monofilament, it floats. So in case you wanted to use top waters, any lures you want to keep higher up in the water column, it floats. It is relatively clear, almost completely translucent. It is very inexpensive. You can get spools of monofilament. I think you can get like this spool here, Academy brand H2O Express, for like $6 for 2,500 yards. So pretty inexpensive, but there are some downsides with using monofilament line. The biggest of those is that it is very, very stretchy. It is a elastic sort of line, and so you'll see here in the stretch test, it is quite a bit more stretchy than other types of lines are, which will definitely hurt your hook sets. It has quite a lot of memory, which means if that line has been on that reel for a certain period of months, that line, when you cast it, will have almost like curly hair. It'll have curls in it because that line remembers that spool. It has memory on that spool, and monofilament just has huge issues with memory. And lastly, it is the least sensitive of all the fishing lines. You will still feel some bites on this line, but of course not as much as you will on fluorocarbon and braided line. So moving away from monofilament, we're going to talk about fluorocarbon. Now, fluorocarbon and monofilament, by looking at them side by side, they both look really clear. They both look like they're made out of some kind of plastic material, but they are very, very different lines, and especially Seaguar, the company that I work with, is an incredible fluorocarbon line company. Just a little plug for Seaguar real quick. They are the only fluorocarbon company that literally makes their own fluorocarbon resin just for fishing line. I don't care if it's Sunline, Berkley, Strand, whatever it is. All those companies use resins that are also made for other products because fluorocarbon resin is used for all sorts of things. Those companies use that kind of a multi-purpose resin, whereas Seaguar makes their own resin for their fluorocarbon, making it the cleanest and purest out there. So with that little plug aside, let's talk about fluorocarbon. The advantages with fluorocarbon is that it sinks. And so if you want to fish lures down on the bottom without any sort of extra pressure of that line floating, you want fluorocarbon. It is even more clear than monofilament, but really if you were to compare the two, probably not a whole lot more translucent. It does have different levels of abrasive resistancy. So depending on the brand you get and the type of fluorocarbon, they make certain resins to be more abrasive resistant than other resins. So like Invisex is not quite as abrasive resistant as Seaguar is, but of course neither of those are as good at tying knots as Tatsu is. So the different types of fluorocarbon resin of course affect how abrasive resistant it is, how good at tying knots it is, how good at casting it is. They're probably all about the same, but that's what the company says. Fluorocarbon line has less stretch than monofilament does, but of course still does have a little bit of stretch. And then it has less memory than monofilament line does as well. So you can leave it on your reels for longer and it won't quite hold those curls, I call them, in your line as long as monofilament will. And then it's about middle sensitivity. So while monofilament is the least sensitive, fluorocarbon, depending on the brand, I found that Seaguar is incredibly sensitive, but not as sensitive as the third category, which is braided line. Braided line is usually the most expensive of the fishing line categories, with fluorocarbon lining up somewhere in the middle depending on what level fluorocarbon you get. Here's some advantages for Braid. It floats. It is not clear, which I guess could be a disadvantage at times, but it does float. It has almost no stretch at all. In short distances, it has no stretch totally, but I haven't done the stretch test yet, but I have a feeling it'll have just a tiny bit of stretch to it, but really it is incredibly, incredibly strong line. It is not very abrasive resistant, so when you get a nick in your braid, it's a lot easier for braided line to break than it is for fluorocarbon or monofilament. But of course, as long as your line is in good shape, good condition, Braid is going to be the strongest line in the fishing lineup. It has no memory, like I mentioned, and it is the most sensitive out of all the lines. If you are throwing a chatterbait or an Alabama rig on a Braid versus fluorocarbon, you're gonna feel that bite a heck of a lot more in Braid than you are going to in any of the plasticky type of lines. So which line is right for you? That is the age-old question. Which line should I use when I head out on the water? And so I'm just gonna read off my notes here because I feel like this could get fairly complicated, but I think it depends on what you're throwing and what the water clarity is. And so in dirty water, line size and transparency of that line really don't matter a whole lot because the fish can't see your line. Now, of course, there's arguments on both sides of how smart are bass really, like can they see your line, can they not? I'm under the impression, at least in clear water, that bass do become weary if your line is a different color than the water around it, and so that's why I prefer to throw fluorocarbon in almost every circumstance. But like I said, if you're in dirty water, line size and the color of that line don't really matter. But when it comes to the lure that you're throwing, you want the line that best gets that fish in the boat. And so with a light wire hook, you want to throw a fluorocarbon or a monofilament line because a braided line would be too hard and might bend out that hook. So whether it's a light Texas rig, a topwater or crankbait with smaller treble hooks, you might not want to use a braided line or at least not set the hook very hard using braided line. It's really all a spectrum. A lot of these videos I make are kind of spectrum videos where, yes, you can use braid in exchange for fluorocarbon, you can use monofilament in exchange for braid. So you really have to get to know what these lines do to better understand your situation. And so if you're flipping shallow cover, whether it's matted vegetation or a brush pile, something like that, you might want braided line because you want to get that fish out of that cover and you have the strength of that hook to deal with the strength of that line. So for me personally, and I think you'll look around the fishing industry at every YouTuber and pro angler, the majority of us use fluorocarbon line for almost every lure that we throw. The exceptions that I have are topwater, punching matted vegetation, and dirty water where I can still get away with having no give in my line. So if I'm throwing a reaction bait like a chatterbait and I don't want to set the hook super hard, but the water's dirty, I still want to get a good hook set and not lose that fish, and that is where braided line comes in for me. Everything else, any sort of clear water clarity at all, whether it's a Texas rig, jigs, crankbaits, spoons, spinnerbaits, chatterbait, I throw fluorocarbon because I want those fish to have the best chance of eating that lure, and I think having braided line kind of makes them a little bit weary, especially of those lures where they're staring at it like a swim bait or a Texas rig or a jig. If it's clear water, I don't want them to be staring at it for too long. I don't want them to be weary at all because of the line. And on the flip side, I could throw monofilament and they wouldn't be weary, but I would not get as strong of a hook set. And so with that last point I made about stretchiness, let's hop out of the boat and show you guys a stretch test to show you which lines, at least in my experience, are better for certain techniques and really show you how stretchy monofilament is. But first we got to talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is Skillshare. The Skillshare platform offers thousands of online video tutorials and classes that touch on creative topics such as illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, business, and more. Most classes on the Skillshare platform are under 60 minutes and are taught by incredibly smart and talented individuals. A class that I just finished taking on Skillshare is how to advance your iPhone photography skills. You know, here in our phones, we have an incredible camera that I feel like is not utilized, and so I wanted to take a class that could help me become a better phone photographer for you guys on social media. And so whether it's classes like that have to do with photography or design, or classes like songwriting, composing melodies, or creating enthralling intros for your videos like the intro I have on my video, make sure you guys check out my Skillshare link in the description below. Skillshare's premium membership is under $10 a month, which is an incredible value for all the amazing classes they have on their platform. And so if you are interested in learning Skillshare, here's the good part. The first 1,000 people to click the link in the description as well as pinned in the comment section will get a free trial membership of Skillshare Premium. So thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Let's hop on the ground real quick and show you guys the stretch test of these fishing lines. So the way that we are going to accomplish this stretch test is we're going to take all three types of lines and we're going to stretch them at a 15-foot length and then stretch until I'm gonna try to do my best to make it about the same tension on my hand, about as far as I can feel that line stretching without it breaking. I'm gonna do that at 15-foot length and then a 30-foot length to show you guys the different types of stretch these lines have. So we're gonna go from my boat here, kind of down to this corner over here, and we're gonna go to 30 feet. So now that we have the tape measure to 30 feet, we're gonna have a box of chalk here, and each color chalk is going to be a different line type. So we're gonna put, what colors do I like best? We're gonna make purple chalk be monofilament. We're gonna have red chalk be fluorocarbon, and yellow chalk is going to be braided line. First line we're gonna test is 12-pound Berkeley trilene, normal monofilament. So what we're gonna do is we're going to tie the line here to my boat. Distance, is this 15 feet right here? Okay, this is 15 feet. And so we're gonna take my line, kind of here my fingers, and we're gonna stretch as far as I can go while still keeping it without breaking. Right there, about as tight as I can go, is at 17 feet. So that line stretched 2 feet. Let me write that down here. That line there, if I go down to the ground, yep, right at 17 feet. 12-pound monofilament. I'm gonna kind of have to guesstimate how far the mono stretches past 30 feet, but if we grab it right here at 30 feet and we stretch, let me kind of wrap it around, right there. 12-pound mono stretches that far, and that is 12-pound mono at 30 feet. So I'd say it stretches a good 2.5, almost 3 feet past the 30-foot mark, as you guys might be able to see down there on the ground. So now that we did 12-pound mono, let's go to 17-pound mono. Here's 17-pound mono. I can only assume this will be not quite as stretchy as the last one was. Stretching 17, honestly, not really all that less stretchy. It stretches out to 16 feet, 1 inch. So yeah, a good foot less. And if we extend 17 all the way out to 30 feet, we are gonna get right about there. It's kind of funny, it's like consistently 1.5 feet less stretch, which is surprising. I thought that it would be a little bit more with the increased distance. So monofilaments are done. It is time that we move on to fluorocarbon. Now we're gonna work with the exact same pound test of the lines in comparing monofilament to fluorocarbon. So we're starting with 12-pound Seagar AbrazX fluorocarbon. And one thing I can for sure tell you already is that the line thickness of monofilament versus fluorocarbon is crazy. I guess I failed to mention that early on in this video. When you're talking about how thick these lines are, 12-pound line is a lot, or fluorocarbon line is a lot more thin than monofilament line is. So, all right, now that we got purple for that, I believe we said red for fluorocarbon. And so we're gonna go to 15 feet right here. We're gonna stretch to about where it's comfortable. We're gonna go down, and wow, it is really close to 12-pound mono, surprisingly. That's honestly a crazy result. It's only like 2 inches less stretchy than the 12-pound mono was. So then here's 30 feet at fluorocarbon, and yeah, right about there, we're kind of getting a little bit too strong there, and man, that's actually more stretchy than mono. That's really surprising. My own results are dumbfounding me right now. Let's go with a heavier fluorocarbon. Red chalk, it's 17-pound fluorocarbon. Again, matching the monofilament pound tests that we used. I'm gonna go right here at 15. Oh yeah, that's got less stretch right there. That's about the farthest I can go, and it's again 2 to 3 inches less stretch than monofilament. So we had some technical difficulties. I didn't know my SD card ran out of storage, and so we did the 17-pound fluorocarbon stretch test. It was actually more stretchy than 17-pound monofilament was, which is just crazy. Right here is 12-pound mono at 30 feet. Then you have 17-pound mono at 30 feet. Then you have 12-pound fluoro and 17-pound. So 17-pound was more stretchy than 12-pound for fluorocarbon, which is not what I expected. And then also, while the SD card was running out of storage, we did braided line, 50-pound braid, and at 15 feet right here, it literally will not pull. So there's 0 stretch at 15 feet, and then at 30 feet right here, maybe half an inch of stretch from there to there. It's like so minimal that it's not even worth noticing. So braided line, zero stretch. So in conclusion, I have a few thoughts. First off, fishing industry lied to us for a long time that says fluorocarbon has less stretch. In some cases, it actually has more stretch than monofilament. At least this one that I got here is the Trilene Super Strong. When it comes to like the H2O Express 6-pound, I'm actually gonna do that test real quick. Let me put the camera down. My experience, 6-pound mono is usually what comes on most rod and reel combos at Walmart. It's a 6 or 8-pound mono. And so I'm gonna go to 15 feet here. We're gonna stretch 6-pound mono. And man, it's really about the same as 12-pound mono and 12-pound fluoro. So it seems like the smaller distances, you have a whole lot less stretch, maybe 4 or 6 inches more. And then if we walk all the way out to 30 feet for the mono, oh, that's where you get more stretch. Well, it broke, but we were at like 1.5 feet past the 12-pound mono and 17-pound fluoro marks. It also probably depends on what brand you get and what type of line it is. Maybe Seaguar, Invisex, and Abrazex, like I tried, are the more stretchy types. Maybe Tatsu or Red Label wouldn't quite be as stretchy. And also I'm sure there are Berkley Trilene lines out there in the monofilament side of things that are a little bit more stretchy and less stretchy. And so I think I'm still gonna keep using fluorocarbon for the majority of my lines. There's definitely nothing wrong with monofilament. I just think if you're gonna count them equal in terms of the stretchiness category, I think the advantages of fluorocarbon being that it's more sensitive, that in these certain types of it is more clear, it is has better knot tying strength. It just has a lot more small detail sort of things that allow me to catch more fish on fluorocarbon than it does on mono. One of the things that I didn't mention is that it does cast a lot better. So when I'm casting a square bill crankbait on monofilament, they might cast the same for the first week of usage, but after that, like I said, the memory on the monofilament line definitely causes a shorter casting distance than it does on fluorocarbon, and that is why I choose to use fluoro. So if y'all enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys check out Skillshare, linked down below. We just lost basically all sunlight, but I'm glad you guys are here. Hopefully you learned something, as I did. I love doing the investigative journalism for you guys. That way you're not just believing everything you hear out there. My name's Tyler. We'll see you guys next time.